This race of these three tanks have rendered the tier 10 gaming experience absolutely unplayable and unfun to play. Hey guys, today we're gonna talk about why the Kranvagn and other tanks like it are absolutely destroying endgame gameplay, which is tier 10. The Kranvagn has been buffed a few years ago and ever since it's been super broken. The tank unloads under 5.5 seconds with an average damage of 1320. That is 65 and 70% of the full HP of the average tier 10 tank, and its clip power is absolutely disgusting when coupled with a short reload of 19 seconds with bond equipment and good crew. This in itself would not be a problem if the tank would not be complemented by other features, such as this. The turret is completely impenetrable from the front by anything other than 420mm pen heat shells of the Jagdpanzer 100 or high rolls from the gold shells of other tier 10 TDs. Why is this a problem, you might be asking? Well, since nobody can pen this tank in the turret, since it has no virtual weak spots other than the teeny tiny cupolas on the left and right hand side on the top of the turret, this tank can pretty much go into any hold down position since it has an insane amount of gun repression as well. This allows the tank to have increased exposure time, since it cannot be penetrated reliably, aka you can just peek for free without the fear of getting penetrated, unload your shells for 1320 damage, go back in and reload under 20 seconds. I mean, what the hell? How is this tank still not rebalanced, you might be asking? And yes, that is a really good question, and Wargaming has seemingly completely abandoned the idea of keeping their tier 10 meta in a healthy, player-friendly balance. If you thought this tank wasn't already completely overpowered based on the sheer amount of armor, firepower and gun repression combined, then take a look at this. The tank has insanely good mobility for a heavy tank, aka you can rotate very quickly on the battlefield, and most importantly you can get into those early damage dealing positions that a lot of heavy tanks can only dream about, such as a Super Conqueror. The combination of all these elements literally grant you a freebie on peaks, getting away after clipping, and you're just able to basically wreak havoc on any kind of enemy tank in any kind of situation. You can even reverse sidescape with it and not get penned, ricocheting everything but heat shells from the engine deck. And even if you get penetrated, it's not going to matter since you can boost your HP up to 2310 using improved hardening and the adjacent field mods that boost HP even further. The counterplay to the Kranvagn is to hit its cupolas when it peaks, which is a super hard thing to do, and even the most accurately shooting unicums constantly struggle taking this tank down. The other counterplay is obviously pushing it, but since the DPM mode is above 3000, and if you start pushing it when it is fully loaded and in a hold down position, he can just clip you out for half of your HP in a heavy tank, fall back, and by the time you get to him, he is already halfway reloaded and will clip you again for the other half of your HP in case he does not bounce a single shot. For the aforementioned reasons, the Kranvagn is the most overpowered tier 10 tank in the game. Currently is the most played tank in rank game mode, being the strongest and most usable for virtually all the maps found in said game mode. The Kranvagn is the most disgusting game breaking tank, and the meta is nowadays completely revolving around being in a hold down position where you are peeking with your impenetrable turret, but not the only tank in the game that can do this. The Chieftain is doing exactly the same along with many other tanks that I'm not going to mention. To complicate matters, a grand total of around 12,000 extra Chieftains have been distributed on the European server, and the Kranvagn is now one of the 3 tanks that can farm increased battle pass points all the way until June. Along with having many more Kranvagns and Chieftains in randoms at tier 10, you also have the Object 279, which is strong against them since the Kranvagns can only pen them from above or cupola snipe them, whereas with the Chieftains you need careful aiming to penetrate them. This race of these 3 tanks have rendered the tier 10 gaming experience absolutely unplayable and unfun to play, to the extent where even some streamers who only play tier 10 tanks most of the time just simply stop playing in the tier instead of opting for playing in tier 8 or tier 9. Wargaming needs to understand that these 3 tanks are completely and disgustingly imbalanced, and they take all the fun out of the endgame content whenever you're playing tanks that are inferior. Right now, almost all tanks without gun repression have become obsolete and got power creeped, since you cannot compete with these tanks on ridge lines. Most of these tanks, naming a few like the IS-7, the Object 277, the WZ-5A, or medium tanks with no gun repression or not that good of turret armor, get outright destroyed without any kind of effort from players that play those broken tanks. But most importantly, it is simply not fun to play anymore at tier 10, since you very rarely get games which aren't flooded by these tanks. On the other hand, the fun mechanics of some of the affected tanks simply cannot be exploited anymore. You cannot flank with a batchet anymore since the maps are all corridor based, You cannot use the insane gun handling of the M48 pattern at close range because you're constantly going to get panned in the turret, which used to bounce shells. You cannot even imagine playing the 100 on city maps anymore against these tanks, since your turret is just going to be made into Swiss cheese in no time and you can very rarely turn fire on these full down tanks. What can Wargaming do? They have a really easy job in my opinion. All they need to do is either nerf the firepower or the survivability of these tanks. In other words, they need to increase the existing sizes of weak spots or add new ones, or take away the firepower by nerfing the DPM, alpha damage or gun handling of these tanks. Why cannot the Chief have a much bigger cupola like the E5? Why cannot the 279 have much more weak spots on its upper plate since its lower plate is already completely invincible? Why cannot the Kranvagn get an additional turret weak spot on its rectangle just below the gun? And no, nerfing gold rounds would only create more toxicity and would buff heavy tanks even further when they're already the most broken class in the game. On top of this, the HE nerf just made things worse for tanks that can just go hull down and exploit the fact that nobody can pan them in the turrets reliably. I am not saying the HE nerf was a bad thing. On the contrary, in my opinion it nerfed lazy people who would just constantly spam HE in the hopes of doing damage no matter the armor thickness or angle. Now you at least have to aim for the overall very few weak spots that are now left in the game, rewarding good aim much more than before. The problem is Wargaming did not take the factor of highly overpowered tanks getting buffed even more into account, and now we, the player base, are facing the dire consequences of this. With the introduction of improved hardening and turbocharger, heavy tanks received an unforeseen buff since now they have even more survivability than before, which essentially reduces the negative effects of enemy counterplay on them, while having a turbocharger, be it normal boosted, bounty or bond, just completely changes the characteristics of some of the slower heavy tanks, which can now get into early positions and rotate much faster. These two factors have buffed almost all heavy tanks by an extreme measure, and since most of the maps in the current map pool in the game favor corridor fighting, medium tanks with little to no armor / HP are massively affected in a negative way. The fact that the situation has deteriorated so much and nothing is being done to fix the meta or make other tanks fun to play again is absolutely mind-blowing to me as a content creator, and I simply do not understand why the whole concept of game balance at tier 10 has been abandoned. Is it because of financial reasons? It is indeed very profitable to keep selling premium tanks at the Kranvagn to lazy people who do not even need to angle it in order to bounce incoming shots. Is it going to be a fun tank though? Absolutely not. And what about the Chieftain? Everyone wants one, right? Yes, but I played enough games in the Chieftain to be able to tell you that it is simply not fun to play. It is very boring to play and it is really frustrating to get YOLO'd by enemy tanks all the time. Is this inaction to rebalance high tier gameplay a direct reason of people shooting more gold shells at these overpowered tanks and this credit expenditure is directly profitable? Maybe. Probably. Nobody knows what's happening anymore. We stopped receiving roadmaps and potential ideas about tank rebalancing. The information tab has been completely cut off and all we get now is purchasable content such as premium tanks, skins and mission bundles. Don't get me wrong guys, I really love this game and I have been playing it for more than 8 years, but it is so sad to see the endgame gameplay, which used to be incredibly fun, just deteriorating to the point of unenjoyable hold-down games. Writing this script made me incredibly furious without even playing the game itself, knowing how much more fun it was back in the day, and I so regret not starting streaming or making videos sooner. The endgame content in my opinion should be enjoyable and fun to play, for new and existing players alike. It should provide a goal and reward all the grinding that has taken place before reaching tier 10. Back in the day this used to be the case, but not anymore unfortunately. If you grind out a power creep tier 10, you're simply not going to have fun. And maybe Wargaming knows all about this, they probably do in fact. It is highly likely that my opinion on its own does not have any weight, as content creators very rarely or not at all are able to influence decisions regarding game design and rebalance. But maybe if we can get a lot of likes on this video, it will get to some of the people that have contacts at higher levels, and maybe they will consider watching it and hear the community's cry for help. So please place a like on this video and let's get it high up so we will be heard. Thank you for watching guys, and take care of yourselves in these dark times.